Okay, what is up, Twitch chat and YouTube? We got another tier list coming to you. I feel like that actually did kind of sound like a YouTuber. Have you liked, commented, and subscribed recently? We're gonna go through the worst design mistakes for vintage from 2019 to 2021 and put them in a tier list, starting from S and going down to not a mistake. Twitch chat has helped us pick out the worst mistakes for vintage from the past 2 years, or I guess more like past 2 years. Um, and they're listed below. So we're going to go through them together and see what we can come up with. Number 1, Hull Breacher. We just talked about it off screen, but Hull Breacher itself, design mistake for sure. Definitely not a design mistake. Definitely not a design mistake, but it hasn't ended up being very good in vintage. It has a top 8 or 2, but mostly due to the shell it's in. Depending on who you ask, I guess some people would tell you that Hull Breacher is very good and an abomination, but it's like a Narset that doesn't do the good things that Narset does. We were just saying if Hull Breacher was white, what would that do? That seems like it would make the card better, actually. It won't pitch to Force of Will, but it also won't get Pyroblasted, which is the eternal vintage struggle, as it were. Oh shit, 2 Hogaaks. Whatever. Whatever. Calm down, chat. Did I miss a card, though? Did we lose a card because we have 2 Hogaaks, though? Is that... I'll quickly shake a look. Is Golos there? Golos is there. Is Stone Coil there? Stone Coil's there. I don't think we missed anything. All right, yeah. Oh, in the Supreme Draft, absolutely. So I do think that this is a design mistake, and I don't think they should make cards like this that are that they're probably not targeted at vintage. It was probably targeted at Commander, but it's going to go into vintage. And so into the terms of vintage, a D. I think that's pretty reasonable. All right. Stone Coil Serpent. That's an interesting one. Because I think that Stone Coil Serpent is like... I don't think it's a mistake. I think it has some power. It's powerful. It's new. It's powerful. It does some cool things, and it provides a creature to attack a format that doesn't have very many creatures in it. So I'm kind of down with it. I'm kind of down with the Stone Coil Serpent. It does do a lot. I do kind of wish it had some amount less text. That is a valid statement. I do agree with that. And we did have Stone Coil Serpent on our tier list of best creatures in vintage. So, and I think it was like C tier. So like, it's a good card. Does that really mean it's a design mistake? Maybe you could say that having all of this text on it is a design mistake. I don't know if I agree with that though. I think I'm going to leave it as not a mistake for now, and maybe we'll move it to D later. All right, so Mystic Sanctuary. This is an egregious offender. Is it an A or is it an S? It's got to be an S. It's got to be close to an S. I think Mystic Sanctuary is an absolutely egregious Magic card. Like, it's got to be an S. It's got to be close to an S. If it's not an S, it's the top of the A tier. This card is dumb. This card could be solved. I guess it would be just removed from the format if it was just not an island. If this card was not an island, it would be more reasonable. But the fact that that card is an island, you can gush it, you can fetch for it, you can daze it. It's so dumb. It's so broken in vintage. It allows the decks that are playing Force of Will and Force of Negation to 2-for-1 themselves over and over again, and then not be at the mercy of top decks. The controlling decks don't care about losing a top deck war anymore, because if they draw a land, it's just an Ancestral Recall. If every land in their deck is an Ancestral Recall, it's fucked up. It's so bad. It's unrestrictable too. It's just completely unrestrictable because it's basically a one-of. So like, you restricting it doesn't do anything. Does that make it even worse of a design mistake? The cards that are actually not restrictable, like Bolas' Citadel and Luris, does that make it more of a design mistake? I feel like that actually adds to the design mistake like level, the power of the mistake. Yeah, even if it said 3 other islands or something, and it wasn't an island, if it said 3 islands, if you have 3 islands, it comes into play untapped, that'd be so fine. It probably wouldn't even see play. I think this is an S. I think it's an S. I don't like what this card does to the vintage format. I don't like the fact that the blue decks just get a scapegoat for top deck wars. They were already great at top deck wars because they play all these powerful draw spells on the top of their deck. But like, oh, it's like when your Scalding Tarn is always an ancestral. Fucking hate that shit. Terrible. All right, we're gonna move on. I might move it down to the top of the A tier, but I think it's at least somewhere on the S tier. Luris the Dream Den. Luris the Dream Den. Now, this is gonna probably be a controversial choice. I know many people would put it as an S. And as printed, which was pretty sure you should go as printed because there's really no reason to talk about not as printed Luris because it hasn't really existed. I guess we could technically have made two things, one for pre-nerf and one for post-nerf, but I don't really think there's any reason to talk about post-nerf because post-nerf doesn't exist. So pre-nerf Luris, I don't think it's an S. I think that OG Luris, the design of OG Luris is fantastic. Maybe the design of Companion is an S. That I could see. If you think Companion is an S, and you probably should. Companion is an S, but Luris, what Luris does, Luris's restriction in Vintage is amazing. I love Luris's restriction in Vintage because what it does is it makes you choose between Tinker or Planeswalkers and Luris. Because you have to choose which of the most powerful cards you're going to play, it is a super interesting choice to make in my mind. The problem ended up being that Companion was undercosted, and then the card ended up being a problem. No, I actually think it is. I think that the choice is actually really interesting. At the time, I was like really considering, is it better to be playing Tinker Citadel or Luris in my PO deck? Is it better to be playing Monastery Mentor and Dak Faden over Luris? Is it better to be doing these things? I think that actually was a choice. I think that was a choice that people underestimated during that time. People just gave up and stopped asking themselves that question. But no, I don't think that's true. To this day, I do not think that is true. I had just enough as much, or if not more, success playing Tinker Citadel and Tinker and Monastery Mentor than playing Luris and PO during that time period. I did. And so I was continually asking myself that question. I think over time, Luris would have ended up just being Underworld Breach and Pyroblast. So I think over time that question would get muddied. But no, why would it exile the card? Yeah, but is that Luris's fault or is that Breach's fault? And I think it's Breach's fault. I don't think it's Luris's fault. I think it's Breach's fault. So, like, yes, Companion itself is obviously like an S+ tier design mistake. No, I don't even think that's true. I don't even think Companion is an S+ tier design mistake because I don't think the idea of Companion is an unbalanceable mechanic. I actually don't hate the idea of Luris, or the idea of Companion. I just think that it can't be 0. 0 was clearly the wrong number. For free was clearly the wrong number. I'm gonna put Luris in A tier. Because obviously it has the broken design mistake on it of Companion in the Companion's iteration. However, the card itself and the choice that it makes you make, like, I want to see Luris unbanned so badly. No, I don't. I disagree. I fundamentally disagree with the people's assumption that the 8th card is fundamentally broken. I don't think that's true. As long as you make the cost real enough. It's not basics. I think you're wrong. I actually think that the idea of Companion is completely balanceable. You just need to make the cost of it appropriate. I want to see Luris unbanned very badly because I want to know, after you make the cost 3 mana for Companion, is the downside of not being able to include Tinker Citadel and Monastery Mentor and Dak Faden and Oko and Narset in your deck high enough that you wouldn't want to play Luris in your deck? Now, The biggest problem with unbanning Luris is that Underworld Breach exists in the format. Underworld Breach doesn't really care about Narset, Tinker, or Mentor. I mean, it does kind of care about Mentor and Tinker, but not as much. And you probably just breaks Breach, unfortunately. But like the card Luris though. I don't know. I don't like how do you separate the card Luris from the problem that Companion as a mechanic is broken? I mean, I tried all of them, Mason. Don't say I didn't try all of them. We tried all of them. All right. I'm gonna move on though, because this is where I'm putting it. I understand if anyone puts it in a tier, that makes sense to me. Veil is Veil a design mistake for vintage? I don't think so. I don't think green is like that good in vintage, and I think having an additional powerful answer towards the oppressive blue counter spells is fine. I think it's fine. We'll just put it there. Golos. I think Golos is a powerful card that enables pretty interesting choices. Besides the fact that it gets strip mine. I do hate that it gets strip mine. D? I mean, I think that Hull Breacher is more egregiously designed than Golos. It's either like a D or not a mistake. I'm going to go with not a mistake. Mystic Forge is clearly a mistake. Is it an S tier mistake? Is it an S tier mistake? I don't think so. Maybe? I don't know. I do think that Forge is broken. And even if Karn didn't exist, I do think Forge would still probably get restricted. I think it's an A tier mistake, maybe. I think Forge is an A tier mistake. All right, maybe we'll move Luris. I guess you. Fuck, I don't know. I really don't think the card Luris as a design is bad. I think Companion as a design is bad. I just don't know how to separate those two. A Collector Oof. That's probably not a design mistake. I hate the card, but it's probably not a mistake. Probably fine. It's annoying because it makes me do different things, but it's probably not a mistake. So let's do Hogak. Let's do Hogak. Hogak. Can I put that on the end? No. Hogak. For vintage, I kind of like what Hogak does. I think the Hogak version of Bazaar is probably the most reasonable in terms of magic play Bazaar deck you could possibly put together. I don't think Hogak's a mistake at all. It's actually answerable by like numerous decks in the format, numerous cards, Swords to Plowshares, Caracas. I don't even know if I consider this a mistake in design in terms of vintage. I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe you could put it as a D, because it is kind of stupid to have a card that just casts off of your graveyard. I'll put it as a lower tier D. Force of Vigor. Fucking Force of Vigor. More a mistake than Mystic Sanctuary. More of a mistake than Mystic Sanctuary. Less of a mistake than Mystic Sanctuary. It's got to be more of a mistake than Mystic Sanctuary. This was just such an inappropriately costed card. I guess that's not really a design problem. It's more of a balance problem. It's got to be close. I mean, I actually think that this is a worse design. This is worse balance. The biggest problem with Force of Vigor is it should not hit 2 targets. Going 2 for 2 for 0 mana is not a downside. That's not actually a downside. It's a huge upside. This thing should have been 1 for 1. And then it doesn't fit in the Force cycle, right? That's the problem. It doesn't fit in the Force cycle. Or maybe you make it like a Nature's Claim, right? It's a 1 mana where you can put 2 cards in and get it for 0, you know? Like, you should the extra cost of paying a card should not give you another target and make it like it's not actually like an extra cost. You're just 2 for 2. the 2-for-1ing yourself has to like give you an advantage, but not super advantage. What if it's just like, what if it was like a naturalize, right? That had the upside, the alternative of going 2-for-1 and being 0 mana, right? What about that? I feel like that. I don't know if that's like not good enough. Is my thing. Maybe it has to be like, yeah. I that's what I would do. Nature's Claim with the upside of being able to pay 0 mana for it. I don't know. I just think so. It's weird because like once you start talking about design versus balance, like I don't think the design of this card being like a green force of will is wrong or bad. I just think that the fact that it kills 2 things is completely egregious, and it really makes like the free spell decks have a way too powerful tool to deal with hate. Yeah, I kind of agree. I guess if you think that like Force of Negation is a negate that you can play for free on your opponent's turn if you pay an extra card, then you should probably just make it a naturalize that you can pay for free on your opponent's turn, right? Like 1 in a green for 1 target. And if you pay the card, then you get it for free. That's what I would do, I think. All right, back in this tier list. I think we decided that Vigor was an S, but I don't think Vigor is as egregious as Mystic Sanctuary. All right, can I put like an S ranking and put Companion in there? I don't know. This Luris is bugging me, but because I guess theoretically it has to be first, but at the same time, I really think that Luris's design is not a mistake. It's just Companion's costing was a mistake. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. Whatever. I'm gonna move on and try to ignore it. And what do you think is A? You think that Vigor is clearly A? I think Vigor is clearly S. All right, Ren in 6. Not a mistake, probably. I don't think Luris is too broken buying something each turn. I think it's like you could use that as a way to tune it down if it was too good, but I don't really think that's the reason. I'm pretty sure the only we'll find out. If they ever unban it, we'll find out, Log. Because if it's still like good and too good after it gets unbanned, we'll find out. Force of Negation. That is not. It's like maybe a B. It's a mistake. I don't like that it exists. I don't think there needs to be more free counter spells. I don't think that adds anything to the format. But I think it's like not crazy. I think if Force of Will didn't exist, it'd be like reasonable to have around. Maybe a C. It's like a C or a B. Oh, I think it's kind of criminally underplayed at the moment. I think that there should probably be more Force of Negations in the format than are currently being played because of how broken Sanctuary is to let you rebuy cards. I think people should be playing more like 8 Negations or something, or like 8 Forces sometimes. Kind of hard. Lavinia is a design mistake. It's not good right now. It doesn't make it less of a design mistake because this card has absolutely no business not being symmetrical. This card needs 100% has to be a symmetrical. Like it's so dumb. It's a B. It's at least a B. It's definitely a mistake. This card. If this card was just symmetrical, if it was symmetrical, it would go in decks where you could actually like, I hate it. I hate that this wasn't symmetrical. It makes me so mad. Thought we did Oko already. Maybe we did. Oko is not a mistake in Vintage. I think Oko is actually perfectly balanced in Vintage. It is a good Planeswalker, not a great Planeswalker. It does some good things against some fair decks that normally you don't really have things to combat. It's not really good against the unfair things, so I think it ends up being perfectly reasonable and dies to Pyroblast, so. This card, just not a mistake. Oh, Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach. I think this is like here. Here. It's not as bad as these things up in S tier, and it's not as like easily restrictable as Forge was. I do think it's got to be an A tier though. I do think this card it just doesn't have enough drawbacks. There's just like not enough drawbacks to Breach. Breach is just it needs to have more drawbacks. I don't know why, or at least make escape cost. I don't even know if escape costing more would be enough. It just feels like there's no drawbacks to playing Breach. Like the only I think that ends up being a drawback is it competes with your other broken cards, your like Delves and your Dreadhorde Arcanists. So I think A, but I don't think it beats Forge, right? Like I don't think it beats Forge. I would maybe like Breach to cost red. 1 red, maybe. That's not really about its design, though. That's about it. Like, this is something that we're gonna keep going back and forth on inside of this chat. Is like, we're talking about design mistakes, but are they really balancing mistakes? They're kind of synonymous to the general public, but they're really not synonymous when it comes to card design itself. Well, I think Forge is just like a bigger. Well, I don't know. I can't, in good conscience, put it more than Forge. I really don't think I can. But its design is really like fundamentally broken, right? But I guess Forge's design is also fundamentally broken, so yeah. Well, Forge is yeah. We haven't gotten there yet. Thassa's are. I think you could say here or here, but I don't think anyone's gonna argue anywhere else, right? So I'm okay with leaving it here. Thassa's Oracle. Now this card is dumb. I don't know why they made this card win the game. I really have no idea why. It feels like it was tacked on, and they were just like, well, what if we just make it win the game or something? Like, this is just egregious. I think that, like, Underworld Breach can be a better card, right? Like, that doesn't mean it's more of a design mistake. Like, I think that this doesn't make any sense. I don't know why this is doing the thing it's doing. I don't know if they thought about the repercussions of it doing the thing it's doing. It does the thing it's doing so well. It outclasses every other like card that was similar to it in like by leagues. If you put a tier list, it would be like S Thassa's Oracle, D Laboratory Maniac. You know, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like it was just a completely a mistake. Like I'm not gonna say that like this card is better than Breach, right? It's not a better card than Breach. It might. I mean, you could make an argument. I could see people making the argument. I'm not going to make that argument. It's kind of a hard argument to make, I think. But it's definitely more of a mistake. Is it more of a mistake than Force of Vigor and Mystic Sanctuary in regards to vintage? Probably not. I think that these two are like head and shoulders above the rest that we've done so far in terms of like what the fuck they've done to vintage and the direction they've pushed vintage in. So I'm going to put it third on this tier list, but still in S tier. Well, so my evaluation of Luris is not my evaluation of Companion Tuesday, is what we did. We talked about it for like 10 minutes, so I don't really want to talk about it anymore. But basically, I think that the design of Luris is great. I think the costing of Companion was the problem. I think the design of Luris is super interesting for vintage, and I really like it. Because it's not it's because I honest to God do not think that Luris's design is a mistake. I think its companion cost is the mistake. So I know it's a kind of a hard thing to parse and put into a tier list where tier list contains very little information, but I at least talked about it for a while. So in the video, it will make sense. On Twitter, everyone will get mad at me. Whatever, I don't care. Karn. That I guess actually Karn is going to be number 1, right? Is it more of a mistake than Mystic Sanctuary? I really fucking hate Mystic Sanctuary. It's an S. It's 100% an S. But how much of an S? That is the question. It's got to be number 1. It really feels like it's impossible for it not to be number 1. But another reason, another why isn't this card symmetrical? Why isn't this card symmetrical? It has no business being asymmetrical. It is actually an all-star in other formats. It doesn't really matter for this tier list, but I think it's just very dumb. Very dumb card. It does. It just. I don't. I think that, or I think Sanctuary is close. I wouldn't fault anyone who put Sanctuary as more of a design mistake than Karn, but I don't think I can do it. Karn made the game Karn the Gathering, and Sanctuary hasn't done that. Sanctuary's warping has been very subtle, very below the surface. Karn was just like, hey, what's up, fuckers? This is my format now. Yeah, Karn is just so inappropriately costed. And it's just everything it does is like really bad for Vintage. So yeah. I think this is fine. This works for me. Dread Horde. Oh, this probably is going to be a hotly contested. I want to hear what chat has to say first. Dread Horde Arcanist. Design mistake? I would say most people are going to say yes, design mistake. How much of a design mistake for Vintage? Don't talk to me about your goddamn legacy tournaments and how no one can lightning bolt it. I don't want to hear about that. I want to think about for Vintage. We got a pretty big range. Pretty big range going on in chat right now. I see not a mistake. I see A. B for Vintage. A. D. C. Yeah, but Snapcaster, while being a strong card, I don't know. Pretty fair card. All right, I'll let you guys know what I think. I think more than negation. More than negation C tier. I think Lavinia, I think Lavinia's design is just such a mistake. I definitely could never put Dreadhorde's design higher than Lavinia's design as a mistake. But I do think that Dreadhorde does some things at a rate which is kind of unreasonable. I think it's actually better. Yeah, I think it's more of a mistake than negation, but I don't think I buy that too much. No. We're not talking about power level. Again, we're not talking about power level. We are talking about design mistakes and what they do to the game. Yeah, I don't think that. I could maybe put it here. I'm gonna put it there. I don't know. It's not, in terms of Vintage. It's not crazy. It's not crazy to play a 2-mana 1/3 that flashes back a card. Like, I can't. You don't have 4x of each cantrip. You don't. Yeah, I just can't. I can't justify this being any higher than a C right now. I think Hull Breacher is not on power level in the D tier. In design mistake is in the D tier. I think Hull Breacher's design is really kind of bad for it. Just ended up being the power level of the card is like not high enough. So I could see some arguments where you get Dreadhorde here, or you get Dreadhorde here or here, but I think it's not. I don't think about it the same way legacy players think about it. I don't think, but yeah. And we're talking about in terms of in Vintage or Vintage. Teferi. I'm gonna put it like at the bottom of this D thing here. I do think this design is kind of shit, but it's also Vintage and it's not really a big deal. I think Teferi, I think it's like Hull Breacher. I think of Teferi in a very similar way to Hull Breacher in Vintage, where it is dumb design. It's really annoying, but it's not so broken in Vintage or egregious in Vintage or doing things that are unreasonable for Vintage. Like, you're paying 1 blue white, which is not an easy casting cost, and you're really not getting that much for it. And it's not really hampering most people besides like the decks that have tons of free spells, which I think is fine. So I don't like it. I do think its design is pretty bad, but for vintage, I don't think it really matters. I think that Oko is not the same as Teferi because I actually think for vintage, Oko's design is fine. I think Teferi's design gets a little itchy. Yep, I do think that Thassa's Oracle is a much worse design mistake than Breach. I do think that. All right, 2 more, chat. We have 2 big ones left. We got 2 big ones left. Narset. I don't think this is particularly close. It's Hull Breacher's design mistake, but also they tacked on free impulses for no reason. Now we already talked about Hogak. Karn is the worst design mistake than Narset. Yes. Not that much worse. But Karn did things way to a degree that Narset could never dream of. Narset did fuck up the metagame though, that's for sure. Oh my god, I don't want to explain why Hull Breacher is not a good card for like the 30th time, so just take my word for it that a Flash 3-2 is much worse than a Planeswalker that double impulses. Jesus Christ. Not doing it anymore. I know Slash is probably memeing me here. Yeah, I don't think it's worse thing. I don't think it's more of a mistake than Karn, but like the idea that we talked about with Hull Breacher where opponents can't draw cards. Once again, this thing has no business not being symmetrical. I think that Narset is a cool card, an interesting card, a card I want in the format if it was symmetrical. If you were forced to do things to play around your Narset effect, it would be so much cooler and more interesting and like, oh, maybe I am supposed to play Sleight of Hands in my deck and play Magmatic Channelers and do things that are not ordinary so that I can make the most of this extremely powerful effect, right? Am I right? I have a meme. It's on my phone. It's the lying in bed meme. You guys seen that one? Where is it? Whatever. It's the one where I wonder what he's thinking about, and it's just thinking about if Narset was symmetrical. I just want there to be blue decks that use Narset's effect, but play around it. I think that'd be so cool. You wouldn't even be able to do the stupid wheel shit either. Right? Would it be played? Maybe not. It might not be good enough. It certainly might not be good enough if it was like that. But the idea, the thought process of can that deck be good is interesting and cool and awesome. But yeah. So I think that Narset is here. It's dumb. It's broken. It's restricted. But all right. The final one. Ooh, man. This is a hard one because it's a non-restrictable card. It's one of those stupid cards like Mystic Sanctuary that if you restrict it, it does nothing. I don't know if it can be number 1. It's an S. It's just where on the S tier does it fall? Where on the S? No, it's an S tier. Citadel is a dumb card. I'm probably the most visible face of Citadel users, and I hate this card. This card is not fun. It makes things very lame. It's very uninteresting, and it ends the game on the spot. It has variance attached to it, so sometimes you might just lose even though it's broken. Tinker, obviously this is Tinker's fault, but like, Thassa's Oracle is Doomsday's fault. So like, you have to, and on to top it all off, also this card just wins the game by itself. It has a win con built into its win con. It can't be restricted, so it's hard to evaluate. I think you have to start by putting it here. Or here. here. It has to be. It has to be at least number 3 or number 4. But is it more of a is it worse? Is it more worse a mistake than Citadel? Sorry, than Karn and Narset? I can't think so. I can't think that it is. I think it's 4. I think that Mystic Sanctuary is a worse design mistake than Bolas's Citadel. I think this has more wide-ranging effect on the vintage format than this does. I think it has more of a wide. Maybe it's actually. What about there? Actually, I'm thinking here. I'm thinking here. I'm thinking here. I think that Force of Vigor and Mystic Sanctuary, their invisible effects on the format are much higher than Tinker's. If Citadel didn't exist, people would still be tinkering, but they wouldn't be tinkering for anything good. You're tinkering for Sphinxes and Blightsteals. So, can you convince me to put it below Oracle? I don't think so. Yeah. I actually, people are like, well, it's Tinker's fault, but Tinker wasn't as good until Citadel exists. Oh, I think Sanctuary is like very egregious, Rodrigo. I think Sanctuary is just stupid. It like really breaks the identity of what it means to like force of will things and 2-for-1 and like lose on like card advantage and top decking. Like it really just changes the entire what is the right word? Theme? No. Game plan of blue deck. Like it shores up one of the greatest weaknesses in your blue deck. Like it's so unreal that you can fetch this card. If you, it's only because you can fetch it. It's really only because you can fetch it. But the idea that this card is fetchable, there's like just no reason that a card of this power level should be fetchable. Yeah, I understand why you might think so, but that's where I'm at on this. Yeah, but it makes I don't know. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about turn 4, but I just think that like when deck goes to turn 4, they shouldn't automatically have their best card because all their lands are ancestrals. You know, I don't buy it. Well, yeah, I mean fetch lands are obviously completely egregious too, but that's a different story. All right, so the only thing I don't like about what we've done so far is I don't like the Luris because I'm just gonna get asked so much about it. So I mean, maybe we're supposed to just put Luris in its own tier. That's what I'm gonna fucking do. I'm gonna add a row above and call it Luris Companion Bad Design Good. I'm just gonna just give it its own tier with its own shit, like whatever. I think that companion. Well, it's not a design mistake; it's a costing mistake, which is again the biggest problem with this stupid list. I love the question that Luris poses, and I just wish it was properly costed. Okay, that's all I want to say. I don't know. What am I supposed to do, chat? What am I supposed to do? I don't know how to put Luris in here. All right, whatever. I talked for like 15 minutes. If they want I'll just link them the video. I'll just link them the video, and then they can hear all of my talk. Yeah, but I don't think it, like, I understand that they banned it, but they, like, I would rather Citadel or Sanctuary be banned over Luris. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I whatever. I'm over it.